Something that my dad always told me growing up, uh, that I still use today is tomorrow's never promised. And that is when that phrase truly meant something to me. When I found out that he passed and just the hardest way, I took time off work.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Habitual Growth Podcast. I've got a very special guest today, Cole, who's going to introduce himself here in a second. But this is actually a really fun interview because I met Cole at a mutual friends symposium dinner where several of us were come together to really talk about things like personal growth development, get some coaching and things like that. And Cole happened to be sitting next to me at the dinner table. So we had a bit of a brief introduction, but obviously really liked each other and wanted to pick the conversation back up. And we thought, what better way than to do it here? And Cole happens to be somebody that I'm really excited to talk to because of his lifestyle. He gets to dabble in a few different industries, which a lot of people are either familiar with, have been involved in with themselves, or definitely have interaction in their own personal lives. And that's real estate. And that's music. And with that, Cole, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to the people so I don't butcher this introduction for you.
Cool, man. Thank you so much, Nate. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome. I haven't actually gotten a chance to share my story like in a setting like this before. So it's pretty cool. I'm always happy to talk about it, right? It's like dinner. So yeah, super awesome. I'm Cole. I was born in California. I currently live in Denver, Colorado. I'm a music producer. I make electronic music in my free time. And during my day job is real estate. I help people find a place to call home. So, and I've dabbled in many different businesses over the years. I've started many different businesses over the years. And I'm now in a position where my love of music has been able to kind of blossom and flourish as I've grown this real estate career over the last 6 years. So
I love it.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, those are definitely high level elements. But, when you and I really started talking, one of the cool things that I think got us on this path of like, hey, we share some really interesting stories and similar pathways to our life's journey. You ended up actually moving across the country for your current wife, and I want to touch on that because I did something similar. I didn't move across the country, but my wife moved in with me very early on in a relationship. But just moving for something that wasn't actually secure is oftentimes very scary for a lot of people. And like you said, you're an entrepreneur, you dabble in different businesses, but take us all the way back. How did you end up getting to Denver? What was that transition like? Why did you make that move? Because I think that's a really important context to your story.
Yeah. So let's go back to 2015. I experienced electronic music in a cultural sense for the first time at a music festival. I went with some coworkers. So I have a finance background and I was working at a bank at the time, and one coworker let me know he was going to this music festival. And I had another friend at the time who was like, "Hey, Cole, I got a ticket to this, an extra ticket to this music festival. Do you want to come with me?" Him and his lady had just split up, and he needed someone to go with. It was a really big festival. I was into the rock scene. I grew up going to play guitar, rock and roll, rock festivals, and I looked at the lineup. I was there to support a buddy, but I looked at the lineup. Oh, Avicii. I know that person, because he was everywhere. And I said, yeah, let's do it. I would love to go and experience this with you. And so found out that my coworker was also going, and we went out there. I met up with my coworker, who then introduced me to a group of his friends who he was pretty close with while I was there. So I ended up partying and having a good time and dancing with this group of people. Fast forward a year later, I wanted to go back. And I told my friend that I worked with, hey, I want to come back and I want to hang out with you guys all weekend because I didn't the first year, you guys seem like really fun people, and did that. Fast forward all the way today, that group of people is still my closest and best friends. The people that I met at this festival, they live here in Denver. They are how I met my now wife. So one year, this was 2017. In 2017, one of the group members of that friend group is his birthday. So they're going out to Vegas, and I'm living in Santa Barbara at the time. And, they said, Cole, come out to Vegas. We want you to come out and celebrate with us. There's like a group of 6 of them going, just a small group. Now, at the time, I was not looking for anything. I will say that I I grew up moving everywhere.
Got it.
And I grew up in Northern California, small town. I left at 17. I was born in a small town up in Northern California. Then I spent my childhood moving everywhere. So I went to 8 different elementary schools, 2 different middle schools, or 2 different high schools. I ended up graduating at a completely different high school from where I started, in a different town. By the time I was 17, I wanted out. I was also dating this girl at the time who decided she would go on an adventure with me and wherever I wanted to go, So we went to San Diego, was there for about 6 months. And then we went back to my hometown. And so that got hard. And then we went to Sacramento. Then we moved to Idaho. Then we moved to Santa Barbara. We moved all over the place. And what I know now is that I was always searching for my happiness, and I thought it was going to be in a new place, which is why I jumped around different jobs, mainly staying in the finance field or the retail field. But, I moved all over the place. And so one year in particular, I was living in Idaho at this time. And I went out to Idaho because my ex-girlfriend at the time wanted to go out there, be with her sister. So I said, sure, I'll go. I'm known for just going with the flow. I get out there, I transfer jobs, and unfortunately, my father passes away. This was 2017. I was 25. I was 25 at the time. And that was like the moment that I felt the need to take control of my life and figure things out and not just kind of go with it. I've been on and off musician throughout the years and stuff, but there was more than just that. I needed to figure out what it truly meant to take control of my life and not just do things because someone else is doing it or doing it to please someone else. And at this time, I told my ex-girlfriend at the time, I want to move to Denver. The friends that I knew that I was always happy with were in Denver. Yeah. And she's like, I don't want to move to Denver. I want to be closer to my family. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'd be okay moving to California if we could go somewhere that, I'd like to live too. Right. And so I kind of started job hunting and I found a job in Santa Barbara. And I was like, well, if I apply, who knows? I've always wanted to move to Santa Barbara. So I applied, I got the job, and we left Idaho, went to Santa Barbara. Most beautiful place in California, very expensive, but the most beautiful place. And something I would say, like, if you're a happy person, it's hard to be disappointed in a place like that. And the scenery didn't change my emotion. And so I spent a year and a half there working and then doing side jobs to delivery jobs and all kinds of stuff. It's never really home, getting lost in video games when I was home, and just not really my ex-girlfriend at the time it was more of like a roommate type situation. I just wasn't happy. And then fast forward to my friend inviting me to his birthday party out in Vegas. So I go out to Las Vegas. It's like a 4-hour drive, which was great. And I get there, have the time of my life with my best friends over the weekend. I met 2 new people in this group, my now wife and another good friend of ours. We hit it off. Like, there was no type of, there might've been a connection there, but it was strictly a friend's thing. And I wasn't looking for anything. I was in a relationship. So at the end of the weekend, I'm driving back and I realize, I had 4.5 hours to think about this. I vented to my best friends when I was there about the life I was living, about not being happy, about just wasting my days with video games and really just quitting everything I had tried up until this point. And I got a lot of good insight and everything. But on the way back, going back to the most beautiful place in California, I was not excited to be going home. And in that moment, I still remember that drive. In that moment, like I'm getting chills thinking about it. I realized it was unfair for me. It was unfair for my ex for me to be living the life with my ex as someone who was, one, not happy, and also not even excited to be coming home after a 3-day weekend away.
Yeah.
So I got back. I slept the night. The next morning, I asked my boss if I can transfer to Denver, and I broke it off with my ex. We drove to the ocean. We sat in front of the ocean, and I said, I want to move to Denver. She said, I don't. I'm like, is this it? Are we calling it? And this was after 7 years of just trying to figure things out. I mean, we were babies, we started dating at 17 and we split at, 25, whatever.
Yeah.
And so we both called it quits. I ended up getting the job transfer, which was amazing, but I packed what I could in my little Mitsubishi Lancer. Before I even called my boss, I called my buddy who I talked to about my life, in Vegas. And he offered his couch to me, and I called him and I said, hey man, were you serious about, offering your couch to me if I moved out there?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, I'm going to ask my boss if I can transfer, if there's a way I could transfer jobs. And, she made it happen. My boss made it happen. My buddy wasn't lying. So I packed up what I could have fit in my car. I drove out to Colorado, just pulled an all-nighter, drove out there. And this was after a week of staying with coworkers until I was able to leave and get out there. But I drove out there. I slept on his couch for 2 months. Once I got out there, I took a 2-week break between getting started with the new position at the next place. And I did a 14er. I went bungee jumping. I went to Red Rocks for the first time.
Yeah.
I lived more in the 2 weeks between starting the new position and leaving than I had the last 7 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was with that friend group. They were the only people I knew out here.
Yeah.
And in that friend group is my now wife. And so we naturally started hanging out. She was single. I was newly single. And 2 months later, we hit it off. And such a strong bond too. And with the most, still to this day, I mean, we're best friends and we've done so much. And so long story, but that's
a great story. I'm actually glad you took the time to frame it up in that way, because you said so many things that other people can see themselves in. And even as you were talking, there were many different elements. One, I'm going to go to Red Rocks tomorrow. It's just down the street for me, so I'll be there tomorrow night.
Who are you seeing? Oh, amazing.
Sphere with Cunning Linguist, Dilated Peoples, and I forget who else is there.
Living Legends, probably.
Living Legends, yeah, of course.
That's gonna be awesome.
So I'll be there tomorrow. But ironically, right before we jumped on this interview, Cole, I was on the phone with somebody who happens to live in Santa Barbara and many years. So I know that, and you're right. I mean, it is there's something about Central California that is just stunning. But I can also put myself in your shoes and really understand, man, when you're in that moment, it doesn't matter how beautiful the scenery is. It doesn't matter what life appears to look like on the exterior. If you're not happy on the inside, it's just a completely different ballgame. You really can't live in that joy and that happiness. But I want to make sure I have these pieces correct in terms of the logistical timeline. Your dad died in 2017. That was when you were in Idaho, or that was when you were in Santa Barbara?
I was in Idaho.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What was it about that moment? Because you said something really interesting. You said, I decided I needed to take control of my life. So what was it about that moment? What happened in the circumstances, or what were you thinking to make that decision?
Something that my dad always told me growing up, that I still use today, is tomorrow's never promised. And that is when that phrase truly meant something to me. When I found out that he passed, and just the hardest way, I took time. I took time off work. Obviously, I got in a bit of a slump and a depressed state. And yeah, he was like my best friend. And but he had his issues. You know, he was and like he suffered from addiction and different things. And so but that one thing is tomorrow's never promised meant more to me than anything at that point. And it made me realize that I've been around death before. You
Mm,
know, but not as close. And being that close to it, it just opened my eyes to like, I'm not wasting time. I don't want to waste time. If, I'll try a new place. I didn't really know what it meant for me in terms of how to search for happiness,
mhm.
but I couldn't be in a state that I didn't want to be in. I couldn't work at a job that, I didn't want to be working under a manager there that I didn't like. The things that did not bring me value in life meant so much more at that moment, and it
Yeah.
just opened my eyes. I need to get them out. I need to
Yeah.
be away from that.
No, it's really powerful. Number one, I'm sorry to hear about your dad. I'm sure it still feels like yesterday that it happened. My dad passed almost 4 years ago at this point. I kind of arrived at a similar point in my career, in my life, where I just realized I read a really important book called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. And in
Okay.
the book, there is part of one of the chapters, he talks about, he's having this conversation with the devil, and the devil basically tricks people into drifting and it keeps them stagnant. And I was going through some personal stuff at the time. And this was before my dad passed, but I had that same moment of you where it was like, I'm just kind of going from opportunity to opportunity because they're there. Not because I wanted it, but it was like the easiest path. Like I didn't have to really put in any work. And then when my dad passed, it was really tough because my dad he was young. He was 66 or 67 when he passed, but he had worked his entire career. He was retiring the year that he passed away. So
Dang.
he was one of those people, unfortunately, who worked in his entire life, was right on the cusp of retirement, and then never got to enjoy that retirement phase. And that just, I think about that, I still get goosebumps talking about it, but it just crushed me because, to your point, that's why it's so important and why I hope people never have to go through that painful process, never have to deal with the death or the addiction or whatever it is, to open their eyes to say, hey, I need to take control of my life now. Like, I hope it
Yeah.
comes naturally. They take the initiative because you are never guaranteed tomorrow. You never know where your life is going to go and what circumstances are going to force you to see that. So I'm really glad that you shared that.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I'm sorry to hear about your dad too.
Thank you.
It's not easy.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But, with that, you moved to Denver, started dating your wife, of course. Obviously, you didn't move to real estate. You moved because you had a secure job. And in that, I'm sure there was some thought process of like, hey, I have this stability. I'm going to go start to explore now. But I really kind of want to focus more not on your real estate side, but more on your music side because one, everybody loves music,
Yeah.
and what started as a love and a passion for yours has really grown into something that's kind of taken over your life. So what was it? Was there a single moment where you realized like, hey, I need to do this more than just dabbling on the side? Like I actually need to get involved.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, I first tried to do this back in 2016, the second year I went to that festival with those friends. I gave up in like 2 months. It was not the right time for me. And I didn't have funds to invest. I didn't know where to go. There wasn't a lot of YouTube stuff out there, and all I had was experience with a guitar. But I wanted to make electronic stuff, and so I gave that up after a couple months and just kept working. And fast forward to my time here in Denver and what led me to where I'm at now with the music stuff. I worked for in finance for 6 years after I moved here. 6 years too long, but timing is right for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not someone that does well with authority really, and also with just structure, a routine, staying in one place, as I'm
Hmm.
sure you probably figured out by now with how I've lived my life. But there was a moment at this new place that I worked at. And, I'd been let's see, I moved in 2018 is when I moved here. And 2019 is when I left that job. Yeah, I moved to August of 2018. And then August of 2019, I left. My experience at the new place wasn't the best. I became very opinionated of policies, which in a corporate world is not people, your uppers don't like that when you're asking questions and things like that. And it got to the point where, my manager was threatening to like transfer me. And she's basically telling me I couldn't really talk to my peers and my coworkers. And it was then that I remember she pulled me into her office and was just like, hey, if you're going to be sharing your opinions, because they weren't always the most positive opinions of the way things were being done with your coworkers, I can't have that negativity around the workplace. I understand, now I understand. But, at that time, what I was being told was you have to stay in your cubicle and shut up, do your job, and that's it. Yeah.
Mm.
To me, I'm like, how is that any different than putting me in a jail cell, at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day?
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask to take a break. I have to ask to use the restroom. I have to ask to take take my lunch at a specific time, whether I'm hungry or not. Yeah. As someone who had grown up with a father who was a hustler and started multiple businesses and stuff, tried to figure things out and side jobs, and then myself who had built businesses and failed over the years on the side outside of the corporate world,
Mm-hmm.
I saw that as an opportunity to finally leave this industry that has sucked every life force out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say finances isn't for everyone, it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And, and when I had that meeting with my manager about like threatening to transfer me, I had said, I will leave this company and start my own business before I just get transferred and moved, And she said, it's really hard to start your own business and be successful at it. And the next day I gave her my 2 weeks notice, and I have not worked for somebody since. So I had the plan already, thankfully, but I grew up in real estate. I grew up around real estate. I also grew up around music. I grew up in I grew up with my grandmother playing guitar in our church when I was young, singing and dancing in the front row. And maybe my grandmother was the one who taught me the basic guitar chords at 11. I'm not an expert guitarist or anything. I can play some songs by a campfire, but it's been part of me. And it was also, music has always been an escape for me, just throughout the years, childhood, growing up, two different families, moving around, taking Greyhound buses between parents, throughout my early teenage years. Music shut out the outside world. And so it's always been such a big part of my life. And I knew that at some point I wanted to start my own business to pursue that passion for music that I've always had,
Mm-hmm.
And when I decided to quit that job, I knew real estate was my ticket to get in. And I knew that, it would give me the flexibility to actually do this. Thankfully, I grew up in real estate back home. My entire family pretty much does it. So it was something I had already been thinking about. I actually studied for real estate in California. And 2 weeks before taking the exam to get my license, I moved to Denver.
Gotcha.
And so it just took me another year to get back into it. But that was the thing. And so I quit. Within a month, I had signed up for what I needed to sign up for to get that license going and everything. And in the process, I had a notary. I started doing mobile notaries to make money, to supplement while I was building real estate. And a year into real estate, I had a few clients. That was 2020. Things started looking good. Pandemic hit. Okay. During the pandemic, I hired a guitar teacher. Like, all right, this is paying the bills. I got this notary thing also helping supplement. Now is the time. Like, I can do this. We're in the pandemic. I'm sitting at home rather than watching TV. Why don't I get better at the guitar? It's something I've always wanted to do, just never been in a position to actually do it.
Yeah.
Music lessons aren't the most affordable. And so I hired an instructor. I did that for a year during the pandemic to get better at my guitar skills. I did that for a year and I'm like still in love with electronic music and still something I've always wanted to do. And the reason I brought up real estate in your question about music is because I went down that path of real estate to fuel the music thing. And I met someone in that industry in a different state. As I'm like growing real estate, I met someone who is full-time music now and everything. She was like doing some music stuff with like some artists that I follow. And I reached out, I found out she's a realtor, and I reached out and I asked her, hey, do you have any like real estate partners in Colorado that you send business to whenever you maybe come across anyone?
Mhm.
And she said no. And I was like, I'd love to be a referral partner if you need one. I don't have anyone in Washington. I'd be happy to connect. So we got on a call and we ended up becoming like referral partners in the real estate world. We helped a mutual client together. And then I watched her quit real estate to pursue music full time.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, what'd you do? This was in like 2022. So a few years after my license, COVID's happened. Things are going good, paying the bills, that sort of thing. And I saw her do this and play some of the biggest festivals in the world.
Wow.
And sign with some of the, a couple of the biggest labels out there. And I'm like, what'd you do? You're living the life that I have just dreamed of.
Yeah.
And she told me she learned how to use the software with this course. And then she signed up for this coaching program, which was a bit pricey. And I didn't even need to research it or anything. I'm just like, well, you're doing what I want to do. I respect you as a person.
Yeah.
I'm just going to follow your footsteps. And to this day, she's one of my greatest friends. She's the reason that I went the direction I went when it came to learning how to do the electronic stuff and the production.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, ultimately it started with me being fed up at the workplace and just taking the leap to do the real estate thing. Cause that was kind of the plan, was to use that business and that industry to free up my time to actually learn this complex skill.
Gosh, that's so awesome. There's so many good things in there that you touched on that I don't even know if you associate them with the things that I do coming from like the personal development and growth space. You talk about timing. We're definitely going to talk about that in a second.
Okay.
You talked about coaching. You talked about actually having a plan. You talked about executing and letting the plan kind of unfold in front of you, not knowing what really was going to be there, but just knowing like, I got to get out of this space into something new that I want to follow my heart with. So there's so many like cool things that we can pull on. So I'll try to stay on track as much as I can here, but I want to go all the way back to the timing piece because that's really interesting. A lot of people they don't think through timing, right? They maybe try it one time and then it doesn't work out and they're like, it's not for me, but the timing could be way off. You weren't in a position to walk away from your job previously, and you probably didn't even have the bandwidth. You were dealing with your wife at the time, which you were dating. You were hanging out with your friend groups. Maybe you were a little bit more immature and you weren't ready for taking full responsibility for your life. And so the timing piece is really interesting. And then second to that, I think a lot of people, when they start something, automatically associate like, hey, I'm going to do this because I love it. And then it doesn't happen in the way that they want it to. And they just have this thought of like, wow, I'm not cut out for starting my own business. I'm not cut out for doing this thing over here. When in reality, it takes time because you don't know what that path is, right? All you know is, hey, I'm at this job. I feel like I'm in jail. I'm getting told I have to I can only use the bathroom at certain times and eat lunch at certain times, and I'm not going to stand for that. So you took the step, right? You didn't say, well, I've got, I don't really know what's going to happen. I'm just going to walk away from this. You actually had built a plan in the background saying, this is what I want my life to look like at some point. I don't know when, so that when you had the opportunity, when that time was right, you could make that decision. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's something that I want to highlight because a lot of people don't maybe have that backup plan or don't think about, hey, I want my life to be here 3 or 5 years down the line. And this has happened to me multiple times. I share, some of the same experiences of I've started many businesses that haven't worked out, right? It's not a pleasant experience. It doesn't mean I don't want to be an entrepreneur and it's not for me. It just means maybe my timing was off. Maybe I wasn't as responsible. Maybe the industry wasn't the right one for me. And I think it's really important for people to know because there's a lot of people in your shoes, right? There's a lot of people that dream of doing something differently, but maybe they haven't put, the first 3 steps together to say, okay, when the time is right, now I can capitalize on that, right?
Right. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your role model as well, because this has a lot to do with like coaching and mentoring. And I don't know if you would associate your friend in Washington, your music friend, with that same piece. But actually, what I took out of that when you were describing it is you were like, hey, this person has the life that I want. Like, I'm just going to go ask how this is done. And I think that's really cool because that's what a lot of people use coaches for. And I don't necessarily like the term coaches, but these can be anybody in your network, right? And I think the most powerful ones are those people that you're like, hey, I see you doing this. That's super awesome. I want that too. Can you just sit down and share a little bit more about how you made that happen? Can you just briefly talk about, what that first conversation was like? Can you just share like how you asked maybe your first set of questions to get started?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember, sending her a specific text at the time. I try to think of the events that were happening when I was like ready to do it. It was near winter time, the end of 2022. I think like just business was a bit slow, and uh I had been following her story on social media and stuff like that, and something just made me want to message her. And so maybe it was that post where she said, she's no longer doing real estate, but I don't think it would have been immediately after. Anyways, I messaged her, I texted her, and I just said, hey, I've been following your adventures, for the last 6 months, whatever it was. And, I saw that you gave up real estate. That's, at some point, I'm sure that's where I'm going to want to be. I want to play festivals. I want to have my music played everywhere. I want my other artists to play my music and all this stuff. And you're doing just that. I was like, can you, like, I want to do that. I've wanted to do this for a long time. I just don't know where to start
Mm,
because there's so many. You go on YouTube and just type in teach me music production, thousands of videos, people ads, people pulling you in different directions,
yeah.
100 different ways to do something. And so I said, I have no idea where to start. Can you help me with giving me some direction
Mm,
so I could, you know, get just be like get started and with something. And she did. She's like, yeah, I started with this course to learn how to use the software, and then I did this to get good at it.
yeah.
And so, and then she gave me a little bit more insight as to what these things were. But I I'm one of those people that like didn't have to go research for hours trying to figure out what was best for me,
Mm,
because she was willing to like share just simply because I texted her and asked.
yeah.
And
No,
I
and that's
she probably
exactly what
could tell
I
that
wanted
my
you
heart was
to.
in it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's exactly what I wanted you to share is, I think oftentimes, people in that position, because I've been there, you don't know where to go, right? Like you said, you just almost have analysis paralysis. You're like, but I don't know any of these people versus, hey, my good friend just did this. I don't know if she's going to say yes. Maybe she will, maybe she won't, but I'm going to take the opportunity to ask. And it's funny because yesterday I had another interview for the podcast and it was with a good friend of mine up the road, and it was all focused on community and people just communicating more. And so many people want to help out other people. The problem is the other side or one or the other just isn't taking that first step to ask, right? And that's
Yeah.
really what I'm trying to stress is like you took the initiative, right? You didn't know if it was going to work out, but you said, hey, you've got this thing, I'm going to just give it a shot. And so I would encourage everybody, if there is something that's kind of in the back of your mind, a conversation that can be had, somebody that has the life that you want, reach out to them, because people do want to help out other people. They want to show off what they've been able to create, because I ultimately believe a lot of our success is built through other people that have been there before. They're just a
Yeah.
couple of steps ahead of us, right?
Yeah, 100%. I do to supplement my real estate. I don't do the notary stuff anymore, but to supplement that business when it's slow, I now do interviews and I take applications for the music production school that I went to. And so speaking of this whole thing about asking, the reason I do that is because at the end of the year, after I learned so much, I reached out to the owner of the company and asked if he needed support on his team at all, because I loved what this program has done for me. Here's my background, in sales and retail and whatever. And
Hmm.
he's like, yeah, how about we give like, would you be interested in taking applications for this program and, making some side money doing that? I've been doing that for like a year and a half now, it was all because I asked.
That's
I sent an
perfect.
email. He wasn't like advertising a job opening or anything, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Which is
Yeah.
oftentimes the way it is, right? It's building the relationships before an opportunity is there, or, like probably happened with you. Sometimes you have to find the right person to figure out what that opportunity is.
Yeah.
But this is really cool for me because, obviously I got to snoop around on your social medias and things like that ahead of the interview, since you and I have only got to sit next to each other for a few minutes at dinner. And, this interview, and I would even say at dinner, you're one person, you're articulate, you're kind of quiet, you dress well, you're put together. And then I go to your Instagram page and I'm looking at your posts, and you're just this different type of person. You just have this different energy about you. You're fun, you're in the moment, you're having a great time. It's like you're almost immersed in this separate world. And so how has your identity shifted? Like and I almost think back to trying to put myself in your driver's seat when you're driving from Santa Barbara to Denver, what's going through your mind. And like all of a sudden, it just feels like the floodgates are open and like you just see nothing but opportunities in front of you. But when you took that step, and then as you've gained momentum in music production, how has that shifted your identity?
That's a good question. So I wouldn't say my identity has shifted in the sense of, I'm like a different person. I would say that it's brought more of my authentic self out. I've always been someone who's very authentic in general, but there is a part of me that is more reserved around people I don't know. If we get on the topic of music, you can't get me to shut up, right? If we get on the topic of inventions, new ideas, anything like that, you can't get me to shut up. But if I'm sitting at a dinner with a bunch of people that I primarily don't know, I'm most likely going to be more of a listener, unless a topic is brought up that I feel very comfortable talking about.
Yeah.
I haven't always been that way, but I think just in the last few years, I've been more aware that I'm like that. But when I'm music realm, if I'm out at a venue, if I'm playing a show, if I'm in the studio with a like-minded person, also producing or something like that, it's just I don't have to try at all.
Mhm.
I don't have to filter. Like I try to not filter myself in general, but like if you're at a conference and you're around very business oriented people, for example, there's going to be a filter kind of I don't know. It's weird, but I don't have to do that. I don't have to try. The passion that you talk about that you see, or the fun person that you see is just me, the most authentic that I can be. And if you see myself looking serious in a video on there while I'm like playing, it's probably because I'm just trying to concentrate on the timing of the song,
Yeah.
you know? But yeah, that smile is as natural as it gets.
It looks, I mean, like I said, it looks like you're having so much fun. And I haven't seen any serious videos of you. So maybe I need to look a little bit harder. You always have a smile. You're always dancing. You always look like you're having a great time. And it's cool. And I really like the fact that you touched on that authentic self, because that's what I would expect, right? When you
Mm.
feel like you can let your guard down, you can really let the music flow through you, which has been a part of your life since you were a little kid. It really just shows how that brings out different types of emotions, different levels of connections, different levels of even openness to opportunities and things like that, especially when you're there in that moment or you're putting a lot of time and energy behind it. It doesn't feel like work. It just feels like enjoyment, even though you're gaining so much experience out of it.
Yeah, we call that the state of flow. When you're in flow state, when you're producing, you get it might take an hour to 2 hours to get there. But once you're there and you're making the music, time does not exist. And sometimes you have to you have to force yourself to eat something or take a break or even sleep. But that state of flow, in my opinion, is pure happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. I can tell. It looks like it's happiness. Well, last kind of question I want to throw at you, because as I mentioned, when we first started this out, I think there's a lot of people that have been through your shoes, right? And maybe they feel like their life is drifting. Maybe they're in a good spot on a beautiful beach watching the sunset, but they just don't feel complete. There is this other, burning desire on the side while they're trying to juxtapose, just how to keep it safe, how to play it a little bit less risky. So, what truth do they need to hear from you in your experience? Like, what does it take to really commit to your passion and starting your own thing, following it, taking the next set of steps? Give us some of that advice that you would share with them.
Yeah, I think this is also advice I could probably give younger Cole as well. And that's, try to think of the things that you value most in life. Prioritize those for one, those things that are not in that list. If you can adjust your life with those things in some form or fashion to free up room to try that thing that you've been wanting to try for so long, for whatever reason, I think you might find that the thing that's taking up space isn't as important as you might think it is. If that is saying no to some friends once a month, twice a month, instead of going out every weekend, to give yourself a few hours to dabble in that thing, a little bit could spark that momentum or motivation and energy, because you're waiting for that emotion to come out. And even a little tiny bit of time to allow that emotion to come out can go a long way, because it opens your eyes. I think that's like a big piece of advice. Don't be scared to move things around in your life if it's not going to be a detriment to your life.
Yeah, I think that's so good, dude. And taking control and yeah, being ready for that opportunity. You shared so many amazing things today, dude. And I've learned so much. It's been a pleasure to get to know you too. And I am going to come see one of your shows. So with that said, how can people find you? How can they get in touch with you? Let's talk about you in general. And then let's talk about maybe how people actually find where you're playing in Denver for those that are Denverites.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me on Instagram. My artist alias is Synchronaut. So it's a combination of two words that mean a lot to me, and that is synchronicity or synchronize, just that whole idea, and astronaut is a symbol for exploration. And so, my whole artist project revolves around exploring the synchronistic layers of music and how it relates to emotion. So Synchronaut is how you can find me, SYNCHRONAUT, on Instagram. Me DM. I've typically message everyone back. I'm pretty active on there. I love the community, especially if you love progressive melodic house. I'm part of that scene here in Denver. My next show is going to be October 11th, October 10th, in the backyard patio of Larimer Lounge in Rhino.
Yes.
It should be a pretty fun gig. I'm playing a back-to-back set called B2B. With another artist I haven't met or played with before. They just asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. I'm like, yeah, let's go. So it should be pretty fun, a little bit high energy, kind of trancey type night, trance progressive house type night. So yeah, I don't know what time yet, but I'll be there that night. So
You'll share it when it's there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Absolute pleasure, my man. Thank you again for being here. And for everybody that stuck with us this far, thank you for listening. Hopefully you took a lot of great nuggets out of this, using Cole as the example. I think he's got a tremendous story. We've all been there. We've all been through some of these experiences, and hopefully this will light a fire up under you to start making some change and take control of your life. Until next time, thanks for joining us. See you, Cole. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.